Hello, I am here to talk to you today about how to use critics and theorists in your academic work in the English department at Aston. Now, I don't know if you've used critics and theorists before. This might be a very new sort of integration into your academic work, but it is absolutely essential in higher education. And this is one of the essential qualities of producing a good essay. So if you have further questions about that, there is a whole video on how to produce a good essay in English. So what is theory and criticism? It's usually written by an academic. It's something usually published by an academic press, and it's basically just the formal, critical, scholastic way of sort of assessing something, engaging with a topic. And so criticism is slightly different than theory. So criticism is more targeted, more specific. It revolves generally around one more niche subject. So it could be what do we think of this one text in particular, or this author's work, or a whole genre, or a whole literary movement, or some other subject. It doesn't necessarily have to be literature based. Theory is often the much broader, almost more philosophical way of understanding something, or is a way of perceiving the world and reading the world or a text or something through a particular lens. And these lenses, as you can see here, are often quite broad. So it's things like gender, race, religion, and as we all know, those sort of have dozens, if not hundreds, of subcategories of theory underneath that. So there's not just one gender theory; there are dozens. So theory and criticism can very often overlap, not always, but sometimes, and you will absolutely need both and need to understand how to use both for a successful degree, especially in English literature. So why use these? Why do we require that you have these? And they're useful because they either provide sort of broader context to support your point. So if you're making some sort of particular claim about, oh, this genre does this, or this is my particular way of reading this, one text, or in this time period, people did or said this. I might say, you need to substantiate that with actual research. How do you know this? Are any other people saying this? So that's what criticism can help you with. Or to provide a greater foundation of ideas, that's where theory comes in. So if you want to talk about things like, power structures, I might say, oh, well, I'll redirect you to Foucault and, theories of the gaze and power, vision and power. So the reason why we ask you this as well is that it sort of proves that you have done some research and that you know the field, you know what's already been said, you're engaging critically and academically with this broad field of knowledge. You do not have to agree with a critic or a theorist. Generally speaking, these people probably have significantly more expertise, so I wouldn't flat out say that they're wrong. But you can quibble with something that they've said. You could say this is a good foundation, but they didn't actually look at this, or they didn't consider this, or the world has moved on, and I want to look at this particular diversion from what they've said. They are there to support you, not the other way around. So what we really care about is your argument, and theorists and critics are there to underscore that you know what you're talking about, you've evidenced this through citing them, you're backing up your points, and that they, to some extent, agree or are showing that you're doing your own sort of thinking and building off of what somebody else has already said. So how do you use this? This might be kind of weird to sort of integrate if you've never done this before into your academic work. So I say for an essay this size, until you get to your dissertation in your final year, most of your written work in the English department, certainly in English literature, is going to be, essays between 1,500 and 2,500 words. So these are not enormous essays. These are actually fairly small. But you're not going to want necessarily to use much more than one or two major schools of theoretical thought. I'd rather you do one very well than show like I know all the theory and cover several of them, but do it very shallowly. So engage with one, really apply one, really do your reading around that. That's my advice to you. There might be some instances if you're answering a question in a particular way where you might actually need more than one or two just to show that you've done the work. If you have a particularly nuanced or niche or overlapping topic, that's fine. This is a sort of case-by-case basis. And this is a very unhelpful piece of advice, but this is what the answer I give, because it's the only answer I can give. When students ask me, well, how many critics or secondary sources do I need? We don't usually have a technical minimum or maximum, because it depends so much on what you are arguing. So there are some essays, if they just do a very close reading of something, and there's not that much theory and there's not that much historical context needed, you could theoretically get away with 1 or 2 secondary sources being cited in your text. That might be fine, potentially. But if you make any bigger claims or are engaging with certain schools of thought, it could be as many as 20 or 30. It really, really depends. And that's not helpful, but I'm happy to always look over maybe an argument and give suggestions. If you say, I want to write about body theory, what do you know about that? I can help give you reading lists so you can investigate and decide what what's useful for you. So for a roughly 2,000 word essay, you'd probably, I guess, need about 5 critical citations. Diversify them. Don't just find one article that sort of covers all your bases, and you just repeatedly cite this one author. Show us you have done the research, you have a sense of scope of this topic. There's a lot written about most of the text that we have assigned to you. So this really shows that you are backing up your points, because you're not just looking to one single person as the definitive authority on any topic. You're seeing that other critics and theorists disagree with each other sometimes. And in that way, you can locate where your work is situated in this broader discussion. Now, I said you could have maybe, 20 to 30 critics. Some students have needed that to support what they are saying. Generally speaking, you probably wouldn't need more than 20, because again, what we are interested in is seeing not only your research and that you know the field, but also your specific close readings, your arguments. So we don't want your thoughts to be totally drowned out in a very small essay by just a giant, literature review. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for an appropriate balance in which you have critics when you need them to help back up what you're saying, but otherwise you are providing us with your original thoughts. And that's something that you will get a feel for over time and be able to refine. So generally speaking, you should always, at the very minimum, Google, go to Google Scholar or go to JSTOR and look up what people have said about your specific text and your specific genre, in addition to whatever broad theory that you're using underneath that, because those can point you in other directions. So doing that reading will actually help, show you, oh, this person has read this book, I'm engaging with it in this sort of way. They're doing this other direction, and just you can do some reading around, and that's where you get creative. That's where you get good ideas, because the more research you do, the more you know what's already being said. Sometimes you think, oh geez, I'm really reinventing the wheel with this, or I'm accidentally plagiarizing somebody. Somebody else 30 years ago had this exact reading that I thought I came up with, out of nowhere. So that's gonna maybe force you to refine this a little bit. And it just helps your work be that much more nuanced and that much more careful. So then some examples of how to integrate critics well. So you can pause this here and read this, but based on this quotation, where you put in quotation marks and properly cite, this critic aligns with Aristotle's views on whatever when they say this. So that's a very neat way of just segueing in, and you're showing sort of agreement. I've done my research. Or, though written several decades before, this text anticipates Foucault's Discipline and Punish through its discussion of whatever topic, as this author or critic writes, and so you can see that even though something is coming way beforehand, you could say, oh, it's sort of predicting that this is going to happen. We can see these, long systems. So it's not necessarily cause and effect, if that makes sense, that the theory can only exist once a theorist has put it into words. These things could have been percolating along far before. They could be working from people as well. So, and here's the final example is a sort of disagreement. So while Bloom states this, I actually don't agree with that. I think that you can, apply a different theory to this text, or it's more apt to read this particular passage in this way. So, there are hundreds of ways to engage with critics. These are just a few of them to help you get a sense for how you should be using them in your work. It forefronts most of this your opinion first, while still showing that you know the field. So you're not saying, well, this author said this, you know, they are the end all and be all final authority on the subject. I have no opinions. You know, it's showing that you are confident enough to actually engage with this and have ideas of your own while still doing the research. So if you have any questions about this, because this is something that can be occasionally difficult to master, please contact me at any point, or any other member of staff. I'm sure, especially in your first year, your lecturers would only be too happy to make sure that, you know, you're doing this correctly if you have any concerns about it. So I hope that this is helpful, and good luck.